All right, everyone, welcome to another episode in this series of ancient history of Bharat. Okay, from today onwards, or from this episode onwards, we are going to start with a new book. Okay, this is um, volume number 2 in this series of ancient history of Bharat. The previous one was the Vedic age, wherein we largely focused upon the from the primitive belief system that evolved into an Aryan belief system, and then further on to the writing down of the Rig Vedas, the Samhitas, the Brahmanas, and finally the Upanishads. Okay, all this has been covered in the first book or the first volume, that is the Vedic age. This is the second volume, the Age of Imperial Unity. Okay, so as you can learn from the title itself of the book, that they are talking about some sort of a unity and imperial unity for that matter. Okay, meaning that I guess the kingdoms will unite towards the end. Okay, so far you can yeah, so to give you a brief recap. Okay, so Upanishads, they were the consolidation and culmination of the Aryan thought. Okay, so now whatever we read upon, all the kings, okay, all of them were Aryans, unless I specify that these are the ones that came from outside. Okay, because there were some Greek invaders as well. Okay, there were other invaders who came from outside. They were attracted by the riches that Bharat had to offer, and yeah. Okay, so all in all, if any of the dynasties, any of the clans that I mentioned, all of them have an Aryan origin or an Aryan ancestry. Okay, so let's dive deep into this. Chapter number 1 is North Bharat in the 6th century BC. For those of you who have a difficulty to comprehend the this BC, AD, and all of that. For those of you who have a difficulty in comprehending the century scale, okay, so when I say 6th century BC, and that is the title of the first chapter, that is North Bharat in the 6th century BC. Okay, so when I say 6th century BC, that means so let's say right now it is 2024. So rewind the years back, 2000 years and 24 years, then we reach a point where it was 0. Okay, then rewind from that point, rewind again 6 years, that gives us 6th century BC. That is what we are talking about right now. Okay, what was the situation of the northern plains of Bharat during the 6th century BC. Okay, there was no paramount power, okay, which was divided into large number of independent states. Okay, these were the 3 important kingdoms of Magad, Kosal, and Vatsa, and a host of minor ones. All right, the same political condition is reflected in the 16 great countries. Okay, Sola Mahajanpada, that is the word that is largely used. So there were 16 kingdoms, okay, 16 Aryan kingdoms that existed, okay, which according to the Buddhist texts flourished shortly before the time of the Gautam Buddha. So from this point forward, we'll also have some Buddhist and Jain texts and Jain evidences as well, because they also help us in reconstruction of the history of Aryan Bharat. Okay, yes, so Buddhist and Jainist literature, they also mention these 16 kingdoms. Next up, to be very specific, RC Majumdar, he writes in this chapter number 1, the Jain Bhagavati Sutra. It also mentions 16 countries, though it gives somewhat different list. Okay, due to the language problems, I guess the Jains, they largely preferred the Prakrits, and the Buddhists, they preferred Pali. Okay, so there might be some differences in language, but largely these 16 countries or these 16 kingdoms, Aryan kingdoms, they remain the same. Okay, so in this in the very first chapter, RC Majumdar, he focuses on just the names of these 16 clans and some basic information about these 16 clans. Okay, The mention of these states is of special importance for, as will be presently shown, they are autonomous clans with non-monarchical, republican or oligarchical form of government. The Puranas do not indicate in any way the existence of such states in this period. Okay, so they were autonomous clan. Rather, it is said that these clans, they did not have a hereditary ruler. Okay, so here it says that they were autonomous clans, meaning they were non-monarchical, meaning they could either be republican or an oligarchy. Oligarchy means some of the rich merchants and everyone, okay, they gather around and they, you know, they are the ones who will largely legislate, make rules, and yeah. Panini also comes into into the play now onwards. Panini, Ashtadhyayi of Panini in his grammar mentions both classes of states, which is the republics to which he applies the term Sangha or Gana, and the kingdoms called Janapadas. Okay, so even Panini, when he wrote Ashtadhyayi, in that he mentions that there are two kinds of states. Number one is a republic, meaning the people elect their leader, or there has to be some sort of an elective element. Secondly, obviously there is a kingdom. Okay, so Panini calls republics as Sangha or Gana. So now you understand why we call it as Bharat Ganarajya, because it is a republic. Okay, Panini also mentions amongst others Gandharva, Avanti, Kosala, Usinara, Videha and also Magad, Anga and Vanga, which he designates as Prachya Janapadas. The existence of non-monarchical clans can be traced throughout the period under review. They were expressly referred to by Megasthenes and Kautilya, and names of many of them occur in epigraphic records of the 4th century AD. Okay, so this entire argument that the kingdoms were largely hereditary from the very beginning, that's a very I would say a misleading opinion or misleading notion that the kingdoms were largely and always hereditary. That's not the case, because Panini, Panini wrote his Ashtadhyayi in 700 BC. So when you reach that, when you rewind the clocks back 2024 years, you reach a point that is 0. Again, you go back 600 years. So that is 600 or 700 BC. That is when Panini wrote Ashtadhyayi. And in his book, he mentions that there were republics, meaning there were kingdoms that had some or the other elective element. Okay. So we don't exactly know, and we cannot claim to know with absolute certainty that how far behind in time did these republics take shape. It wasn't like an overnight phenomenon. Okay, that when Ashtadhyayi, when Panini was writing that book, okay, suddenly the republics rose. No, that's not how things work. It takes centuries of trial and error for something to be perfected and then start existing. Okay. So all I'm saying is there were republican states. The idea of democracy as is wrongfully credited to the Greeks. Okay, that's not the case. Okay, and I am not taking away anything from the Greeks. I'm not saying they copied things from us. They might have had their own, inventions, their own theories, but we did not need the Greeks to teach us the concept of democracy. It has always been here. Okay. Alright, next up is in the 6th century BC, a large number of states, both great and small, and many of these were not ruled by kings but formed petty republics or oligarchies. The same thing, okay, the first one is the kingdom of Anga. Okay, it has some, people who are fans of the epics of Mahabharata and Ramayana, they might have heard of this name Anga. It's the, Karna. Karna was the king of Anga. Okay, Anga and Vanga in the first group of the Aryan people. Anga, as described in Mahabharata, seems to have comprised the districts of Bhagalpur and Munger. Bhagalpur and Munger are in the current state of Bihar. Okay, so that is where the kingdom of Anga was located. Okay, I can remember I went for a trekking expedition in the state of Uttarakhand, and that is where they call it Karna Bhumi. Okay, there are temples dedicated to Karna. So yeah, I mean, whatever that means, but if Karna was the king of Anga, how did the information reach Uttarakhand? Badia and Asapura were the other towns of Anga kingdom. There are also towns in that kingdom that is mentioned over here. Okay, its long rivalry with and final conquest by Magad has been mentioned above. Okay, Magad was again a power that had to be reckoned with by all the kingdoms, not just Anga. So yeah, they had a long-standing rivalry, and finally Magad managed to overtake Anga. Okay, Kashi, the kingdom of Kashi, it was wealthy and prosperous. Okay, have you ever wondered why these invaders and everyone came over here? That something had to be here. Okay, all right. They did not just stumble upon Bharat as simply on an expedition. Word gets around. The kingdom of Kashi, it was wealthy and prosperous. The Jatakas are the stories of Buddha in his childhood, if I'm not wrong, or yeah, the Buddhist Jatakas. Yes, yeah. The Jatakas speak of a long rivalry between the two kingdoms of Kasi and Kosala for supremacy. Okay, so if indeed they were just merely myths, okay, so let's consider this argument that the left and all the liberal scholars, usually put forward that no, all these things are simply just religious scriptures and there is no historical value over here. Okay, why would somebody cook up such fiction like there was a long-standing rivalry between Kasi and Kosala? So if indeed there was a rivalry, there had to be two kingdoms. If there were kingdoms, we cannot say that they started overnight. Kingdoms take centuries. Okay. Next up is Kosal. Kingdom of Kosal corresponded to modern Awadh. Awadh is a place in Uttar Pradesh, if I'm not wrong. So that was where the kingdom of Kosal was located. The country of Kosal proper was divided into north and south, evidently by the river Sarayu. Sarayu is a very famous river where the Ram temple, okay, the Ram temple is located in Ayodhya. Okay, so that is where the kingdom of Kosala. Interestingly, there is one very interesting incident of King Prasenjit. Prasenjit was a king of the Kosala kingdom. He was a contemporary of Buddha, meaning during the time of Buddha's, I would say when Buddha was at the peak of his career, of his spiritual career, okay, Prasenjit was the king of Kosala and one of the most important rulers of the time. Now there is one interesting story in this book that RC Majumdar has mentioned on page number 5 for those of you who are actually reading this book. But for those of you who are not and just watching these videos, first of all, thank you for watching. And so the story goes like this. Okay, now Prasenjit as a king, he was very much inspired by Buddha and his work. Okay, so he wanted to start his own progeny with the same genes as the Buddha had. Okay, now Buddha, he belonged to the Sakyas, the Sakya clan. Okay, now what Prasenjit did was he demanded a woman from that clan, that give me a woman that I can keep as my wife, and I want to start a progeny with the same genes that the Buddha had. Okay, but the Sakyas, they were very much possessive about their own genetic material. Instead, I'm really sure they would have considered outrightly denying, but the relevance that Kosala carried during those times, they could not they could not offend the king during those times. So what they did was they refused to give to send over a girl for Prasenjit to marry. Instead, what they did was they gave someone, it's written over here, the offspring of a Sakya chief by a slave girl was passed off as a legitimate daughter of the Sakya race and married to Prasenjit. So that in a way they tricked Prasenjit. They sent somebody else. They told him that she had the genetic material of the Sakyas, and so Prasenjit was tricked. Okay, and eventually he figures this out. Okay, he figures this out, he confronts all these people and wages some war. But during this time, okay, Buddha told him that whatever might have been the origin of the queen, the son belonged to the caste of a father. And on his advice, Prasenjit restored both the queen and the prince. So this was the story. I mean, this tells you a lot about matrimonial alliances and how things functioned in that society. Of all the kings of this period, Prasenjit is the only outstanding personality. Detailed references in the Buddhist texts. Okay, thank God we have Buddhist and Jain texts, otherwise we would not be able to reconstruct the history. Okay, so the name of that son that Prasenjit got out of that Sakya princess, the name of that son was Vidudabha, who succeeded him, invaded the Sakya country and massacred the Sakya clan, sparing neither men nor women and children. So this was the king. Okay, he massacred the entire Sakya clan. He destroyed it. Okay, doesn't matter if Buddha belonged to that clan. He destroyed the entire clan. Next up are the Vrijis. Okay, all of them were Aryans. Kosala, Kasi, Anga, and this is Vriji. Okay, they were divided into confederacies. The Lichavis, the Natrikas, the Vajis were the most prominent. Okay. Next up are the Mallas. Mallas are often mentioned in the Buddhist and Jain works, a powerful tribe dwelling in the eastern Bharat. So they were on the eastern side of the current map that you see. Okay, so they go by the name of Mallas. The Mallas, like the Lichavis, were mentioned by Manu as Vratya Kshatriyas. They were called Vashishthas in the Mahaparinibbana Suttana. Okay. Next up are the Chedis or Chetis, had two distinct settlements, of which one was in the mountains of Nepal and other in the Bundelkhand near Kosambi. Okay, again they were also the Aryans. The country of Vatsa, rich and prosperous. This is another country out of the 16. Vatsa, high quality of cotton fabrics. Udayana was a very powerful king, and a number of interesting legends center around his rivalry with King Pradyota of Avanti. But there is also one more. Okay, now everyone knows the meaning of Trojan horse. Okay, but do you know the origin of this metaphor of Trojan horse? Apparently it was something that happened in ancient Greece, where some Sparta king made a wooden horse, hid some soldiers inside that wooden horse, gifted somebody, and hence the term originated, Trojan horse. And it is usually the Greeks who are credited with this idea of building a wooden horse, but that is not the case. Okay, my dear friends and viewers, that is not the case. Okay, so here, okay, knowing Udayana's passion for catching elephants, so Udayana and Pradyota, they both were rivals during this time. Okay, now there was a king who went by the name of Pradyota in Avanti. Okay, now Pradyota knew that Udayana was fond of catching elephants. So knowing Udayana's passion for catching elephants, he had one made of wood. Okay, he made one elephant made of wood with 60 soldiers concealed inside and set it up in a forest near the boundary of the two kingdoms. Udayana fell into the trap and was taken prisoner. Okay, so similar tactics were prevalent all across the world. I am not saying the Greeks copied us, or neither am I conceding that we copied the Greeks. No, the Greeks did not teach the idea of Trojan horse, or I can be mistaken, if not Greeks, somebody else. Okay, so this idea of Trojan horse has always been there, and somebody, I think it was Sparta, whoever, I don't remember, but somebody is credited with coming up with the idea of Trojans. No, that's incorrect. They might have come up with it on their own, but we also have a parallel to it. Okay, there are also some instances given about Udayana. It was at first not favorably inclined towards Buddhism, and it is said that if in the fit of a drunken rage he tortured Pindola, a famous member of the Buddhist order, by tying him down in the nest of brown ants. Later, however, the same Pindola made him a devotee of Buddha. According to the Jatakas, the capital of the Kurus was Indraprasth, near modern Delhi, which extended over 7 leagues. The Kurus continued to enjoy their ancient reputation for deep wisdom and sound health. The Kurus had matrimonial relations with the Yadavas, the Bhojas, and the Panchalas. Okay, the next up are the Panchals, the north and east of Delhi, from the foot of the Himalayas to the river Chambal, and Ganga divided into the north and south Panchala. Okay, Panchalas were again another another clan of the Aryans. Okay, the famous city of Kanyakubj or Kannauj was situated in the kingdom of Panchala. Originally a monarchical clan, the Panchalas formed a Sangh or a republican corporation in the 6th and 5th centuries BC. So originally they were a monarchical clan, the Panchals, but later on they became a republic. The Matsyas, their territory was located in the current day of Jaipur. Okay, in the Ramayana we find a similar reference to Veera Matsya. The king Sahaja ruled over the Chedis and the Matsyas. Matsya thus once formed a part of the Chedi kingdom. Okay, next up is the Surasena. The Surasena country is capital at Mathura on the Yamuna. Now, one very interesting thing that you must note over here is the Andhakas and the Vrishnis of Mathura are referred to in Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So there are some kings of Mathura that are referred by Panini in his book of Ashtadhyayi. Okay. In Kautilya's Arthashastra, the Vrishnis are described as Sangha, that is a republican corporation. The Vrishnis, Andhakas and other allied tribes formed a Sangha, and Vasudev is described as Sangha Mukhya. And in bracket it is written Krishna. So name is Vasudev and in bracket they have written Krishna. So I don't need to explain who is being talked about over here. God himself. Okay. So yeah, Mathura, the king of Mathura, it is mentioned over here, was Vasudev, Krishna. The Surasena kingdom then became an integral part of the Magadhan empire. Finally, it was, after all, it became a center of Krishna's worship. Even Megasthenes, who came over here in 300 BC, has mentioned about it. And finally, the Surasena kingdom, it was merged into the Magadhan empire. Alright, so there are a few others, Aswaka, Avanti, Gandhara, Cambodia. Okay, so all these kingdoms will be covered in the next episode in the ancient history of Bharat. Till then, Jai Hind. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.